For 3 years, nobody questioned why the old janitor at Miller's military surplus never seemed to need directions. He knew exactly where every piece of military equipment belonged, could identify tactical gear by touch, and moved through the store with the precision of someone who'd worn those uniforms before most of the staff were even born. Frank Williams kept his head down, said little, and went about his work, while customers browsed through tactical vests, combat boots, and field equipment. But on this Tuesday morning, when a young clerk made the mistake of challenging him, the quiet man's past was about to catch up with the present in the most powerful way imaginable. Welcome to Unsung Heroes Story. Before we begin this powerful story, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us keep these voices alive. The military surplus store Miller's, near Fort Bragg, North Carolina, opened at 7 a.m. But Frank Williams was always there by 6:45. He never spoke much, signed the clipboard at the front desk with slow, deliberate handwriting, last name only, Williams. No rank, no greetings, no small talk, just a nod to the guy behind the counter, and then the same quiet steps to the farthest aisle, number 7. The store itself was a shrine to military history, walls lined with vintage uniforms from Vietnam to Iraq, shelves stocked with tactical gear that had seen real action, and display cases filled with medals and insignia that told stories most customers would never understand. The smell of gun oil and old canvas hung in the air like incense in a forgotten chapel. Frank wore the same thing every time: faded jeans, a tan flannel shirt with sleeves rolled up, and a brown baseball cap that had once been blue. No patches, no slogans. The brim curved just enough to shade his eyes. His boots were worn but clean, the kind that had walked through more than parking lots and sidewalks. He carried his cleaning supplies in his right hand, low and steady, and never brought more than he needed. There was something about the way he moved through the store that separated him from every other civilian employee they'd ever had. His steps were measured, deliberate. When he organized gear, his hands seemed to know the weight and balance of every item without looking. He could identify military equipment by touch alone, knew which uniforms belonged to which era, and had an uncanny ability to spot counterfeit gear from across the room. The regulars called him Pops, or the old guy, and half of them thought he was just another retired truck driver with a pension and too much time on his hands. They joked about how methodical he was, how he treated every task like it was mission critical. Some found it endearing, others thought it was just the obsessive behavior of an old man with nothing better to do. But the staff noticed something different: the way he moved, the way he checked his surroundings with quiet precision, never fully relaxed, always aware of who was coming and going. The way his eyes lingered not on customers' faces but on their hands, their posture, their gear. The way he could spot a veteran from 50 feet away, not by what they wore but by how they carried themselves. Store manager Andy Morrison had hired Frank 3 years ago, and in all that time the old man had never been late, never called in sick, never complained about overtime or asked for a raise. He showed up before everyone else and left after the store was spotless. Andy knew Frank lived alone in a small apartment 20 minutes away, drove a pickup truck older than some of the staff, and had no family that ever visited or called. But beyond that, Frank Williams was a mystery. That Tuesday morning started like any other. The autumn air carried a chill that reminded everyone winter was coming, and the store was busier than usual, with hunters and military enthusiasts preparing for the season. A couple of young sales clerks were working the floor: Tyler Richardson and Jake Morrison, both 22, both from military families, but who had chosen college over service. Tyler was the nephew of a Marine colonel, grew up around bases, knew military terminology, and could talk tactics with customers. But talking about war and living through it were two different things. Jake was the store manager's son, had been working there since high school, and considered himself an expert on military gear, despite never having worn a uniform that mattered. For them, this job was temporary, a way to make money while figuring out their real careers. They treated the store like their personal hangout, often joking with each other about customers, sharing memes on their phones between sales, and generally treating the work as anything but serious. To them, the military surplus business was just another retail gig with cooler merchandise. Frank was working quietly as always, methodically organizing a shipment of vintage uniforms that had come in the day before. Each piece needed to be authenticated, properly tagged, and displayed in chronological order. It was detailed work that required knowledge most people didn't possess, but Frank handled it with the efficiency of someone who had worn these uniforms when they were new. Tyler was showing a customer an M4 replica when he noticed Frank carefully examining a Vietnam-era jungle fatigue jacket, checking the stitching, the fading patterns, the wear marks that indicated authentic field use versus warehouse storage. The old man held the uniform with a respect that bordered on reverence, as if it contained the spirit of the man who had worn it. "Hey, old man," Tyler called out with a laugh that carried across the store. "Those aren't your size. Those uniforms are for real soldiers." The customer Tyler was helping looked uncomfortable, glancing between the young clerk and the elderly man. Frank didn't respond immediately, just continued his examination of the uniform, running his fingers along seams that had been stressed by combat conditions. Jake, emboldened by his friend's comment and always eager to join in when someone else started the joke, chimed in, "Yeah, maybe you should stick to the cleaning supplies section. That's more your speed." Other customers in the store began to notice the exchange. A middle-aged woman browsing camouflage gear looked up with a frown. An older gentleman examining surplus boots stopped what he was doing to watch. The atmosphere in the store shifted subtly, the way it does when something uncomfortable is happening, and everyone can feel it, but no one knows quite how to respond. Frank slowly hung the uniform back on its designated rack, ensuring it was properly aligned with the others. His movements were precise, controlled, betraying no emotion despite the public humiliation. He had learned long ago that some battles weren't worth fighting, that sometimes the best response to ignorance was silence. "Are you listening? You don't belong here. This is real military gear." Frank turned and looked at Tyler. He didn't speak, just looked. But there was something in that look. Weariness, weight, the kind of silence Tyler couldn't understand. The store manager, Andy Morrison, had been there for 15 years. He was a good man, fair employer, but he had a blind spot when it came to his son, Jake. Andy had hired Frank 3 years ago, when the previous cleaning service had proved unreliable, and in all that time, Frank had been the model employee. Never late, never sick, never complained, never caused trouble. Andy respected Frank's work ethic, but knew virtually nothing about his background. What Andy didn't know was that Frank Williams had specifically sought out this job. After retiring from the army, Frank had tried several different occupations: security guard, handyman, even a brief stint as a substitute teacher, but nothing felt right. The civilian world seemed soft, disconnected from the realities he had lived through. When he heard about the opening at Miller's military surplus, something drew him there. Being around military gear, seeing young soldiers and veterans come through the doors, maintaining equipment that might one day save lives, it gave his retirement a sense of purpose. As Tyler and Jake's harassment continued, Andy was in the back office, reviewing inventory reports and dealing with a supplier who was late on a shipment of winter gear. The office was soundproofed enough that he couldn't hear what was happening on the sales floor, couldn't see his son and his friend systematically humiliating the man who had kept their store running smoothly for 3 years.
"Look, old man," Tyler spoke in a more aggressive tone, stepping closer to Frank with the kind of false confidence that comes from pack behavior. "There are customers here trying to buy real military gear. You're making them uncomfortable just hanging around where you don't belong." Jake, feeding off his friend's energy and enjoying the feeling of power that came from having an audience, decided to escalate further. "Yeah, this is a serious business. Military equipment, tactical gear, stuff for people who actually understand what it means to serve. You're just the cleaning guy." The words hung in the air like smoke from a discharged weapon. Other customers had stopped their browsing entirely now. some moving closer to intervene, others backing away from the confrontation. A young soldier in civilian clothes who had been looking at Boots took a step forward, his face darkening with anger at what he was witnessing. But Frank maintained his silence. He had been disrespected by experts, had endured interrogation techniques designed to break much younger men, had kept secrets that could have saved his life if revealed. Two spoiled kids with inherited opinions about military service were not going to break his composure. However, this time something was different. As Tyler continued his verbal assault, Frank's right hand unconsciously moved to his left forearm, a nervous habit he'd developed over the years. The motion caused his flannel shirt sleeve to ride up slightly, revealing just a hint of what lay beneath, a faded tattoo that had been etched into his skin in a field hospital in Da Nang 48 years ago. But someone else did. Carol Henderson was a 45-year-old retired army nurse who had served 2 tours in Iraq before a roadside bomb had ended her military career. She had come to Miller's that morning looking for a replacement for her worn-out tactical boots, the same brand she had worn overseas. Carol understood military culture, understood the bonds that connected those who had served, and she had an eye for spotting fellow veterans even when they weren't advertising their service. She had been watching the confrontation unfold with growing disgust. Tyler and Jake reminded her of the worst kind of military dependence. Kids who had grown up around bases, absorbing military jargon and warrior culture without ever understanding the sacrifice it represented. They wore the terminology like a costume while missing the substance entirely. But when Frank's sleeve rode up and Carol caught a glimpse of what was underneath, her blood went cold. The tattoo was old, faded by decades of sun and time, but unmistakable to anyone who knew military iconography. A Special Forces trident, but not the modern version. This was the Vietnam-era design, the one that had been earned in jungles and rice paddies by men who had volunteered for missions that had no backup plans. Carol had seen that particular tattoo exactly twice in her life. Once on a grizzled sergeant major who had trained her combat medic course, a man whose reputation was whispered about in Army medical circles. The second time was in a classified briefing about Medal of Honor recipients whose actions had been buried under layers of operational security. Without hesitation, Carol pulled out her cell phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she needed. Master Sergeant David Chen, retired Special Forces, now worked as a contractor training new Green Beret recruits at Fort Liberty. If anyone would know who Frank Williams really was, it would be Chen. The call connected on the second ring. Chen? Dave, it's Carol Henderson. I need you to put the word out to your network. There's a situation at Miller's military surplus near Bragg. Old man, early 70s, Vietnam-era SF trident on his left forearm. He's being disrespected by store staff. There was a pause. Description? Gray hair, flannel shirt, brown cap, quiet, dignified. Handles military gear like he knows what it's for. Another pause, longer this time. When Chen spoke again, his voice had changed, became harder. Williams? Could be. Jesus Christ, how long ago? Carol looked at her watch. It's happening now. We're moving. The line went dead. Carol slipped her phone back into her pocket and continued watching as Tyler and Jake escalated their harassment, completely unaware that they had just triggered a response that would change their lives forever. Tyler and Jake's assault on Frank's dignity continued to escalate, fueled by what they mistook for victory. Other customers had begun to leave, uncomfortable with the toxic atmosphere that had infected the store. The young soldier who had been looking at Boots approached the counter with a disgusted expression. "Hey," he said to Tyler, "that's not cool, man. You don't know who that guy is." Tyler, high on his own perceived authority, turned his aggression toward the soldier. "And who are you, his bodyguard? This is a business, not a retirement home." The soldier, a 19-year-old private fresh out of basic training, looked like he wanted to say more, but Frank caught his eye and gave him the slightest shake of the head. The message was clear. "Not your fight, son." "Maybe you should find a job that suits your age," Tyler continued, his voice carrying across the store. "Like, I don't know, grocery bagging? Mall security? something where you don't get in the way of people doing real work. Jake, emboldened by what he saw as Tyler's dominance of the situation, decided to deliver what he thought would be the killing blow. Yeah, this place is for people who understand military culture, people with real connections to the service, not just random old guys who probably got rejected from the draft. The comment hit the store like a physical blow. Several customers audibly gasped. The young soldier's hands clenched into fists. Even the woman, browsing camouflage gear, looked ready to intervene. But Frank Williams, this quiet man who had endured more in a single day in Vietnam than these boys would face in their entire lives, simply nodded. He had heard worse. He had been tortured by professionals, had been written off by politicians, had been forgotten by a country that preferred its heroes sanitized and convenient. Frank finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "I'm just doing my job." "Your job isn't here," Tyler laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Your job was never here. This place is for real people, with real connections to real military service." Frank looked around the store one last time, at the uniforms he had organized, the gear he had maintained, the displays he had arranged with the care of someone who understood that each piece represented a story, a sacrifice, a life changed forever. Then he nodded once more, gathered his cleaning supplies with the same methodical precision he brought to everything, and walked toward the exit. The store fell silent, except for the sound of Frank's boots on the linoleum floor. Tyler and Jake watched him go with smug satisfaction, completely unaware that they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. They had no idea that Carol Henderson's phone call had set in motion a response that was already mobilizing 30 miles away. 30 miles away, at Fort Liberty, Master Sergeant David Chen was finishing up a training session with a new class of Green Beret candidates when his phone rang. The conversation with Carol Henderson lasted less than 2 minutes, but it changed everything. Chen didn't need to see the man to know who Carol was describing. Frank Williams was a legend in Special Forces circles, though his name was rarely spoken outside of secure briefings and classified after-action reports. Williams had been Chen's instructor 25 years ago, the man who had taught him that the difference between survival and death often came down to details other people ignored. Within minutes, Chen had made 11 phone calls to men scattered across 3 states. Some were still active duty, others long retired. Some worked as contractors, others had moved on to civilian careers. But every single one of them answered on the first ring, and every single one of them dropped what they were doing when they heard the name Williams and the word disrespected in the same sentence. The mobilization was swift and efficient, conducted with the same precision these men had once used to coordinate operations in hostile territory. No dramatic speeches, no angry rhetoric, just professionals organizing a response to an unacceptable situation. At 11:30 a.m., 3 vehicles departed from different locations around Fort Liberty. The lead vehicle carried Chen and 3 other retired Special Forces operators. The second carried 4 active-duty Green Berets who had been granted immediate personal leave by a sympathetic commanding officer who understood exactly what was happening. The third carried 5 more veterans, including 2 who had driven up from Georgia after Chen's call interrupted their morning coffee. At 11:43 a.m., exactly 1 hour and 14 minutes after Frank Williams had been publicly humiliated and thrown out of Miller's military surplus, a matte black SUV pulled into the store's parking lot. The engine stayed running. A minute later, a second SUV parked beside it. Then a third. No music played from the vehicles. No movement was visible through the tinted windows. Just 3 silent machines containing 12 men who had decided that enough was enough. Inside the store, Tyler and Jake were still riding high on their victory, completely oblivious to the shift in atmospheric pressure that was about to hit them. They had returned to their phones, occasionally making jokes about finally cleaning house and getting rid of dead weight. Other customers had begun to trickle back in, though the atmosphere remained tense and uncomfortable. Then the doors opened. All 3 vehicles simultaneously, and 12 men stepped out into the North Carolina afternoon sun. Their movements were precise, coordinated, unhurried but carrying the unmistakable weight of purpose. Some wore civilian clothes, jeans, flannel shirts, work boots. Others wore dress uniforms with ribbons and decorations that told stories of courage under fire. A few wore the distinctive green berets that had given their unit its nickname. But clothing was irrelevant. The way they moved, the way they carried themselves, the way they instinctively maintained tactical spacing as they crossed the parking lot, everything about them announced exactly who they were and what they were capable of. They crossed the sidewalk and entered through the front door one by one. The bell chimed softly as they entered, and even that sound felt different. Not a single word was spoken. They simply spread out in a calm, semicircular formation facing the counter. The youngest clerk, Tyler, barely looked up from his phone. "Welcome, gentlemen. Looking for anything specific today?" Then he looked up and froze. 12 men, still quiet, eyes locked on him. The oldest of them, graying hair, square jaw, chest bearing rows of ribbons and the unmistakable green beret trident, stepped forward. "An hour ago," he said evenly. "One of us walked through this door." His voice wasn't loud, but it hit with force. The second clerk, Jake, cleared his throat uncomfortably, eyes flicking toward the door as if hoping to escape. The green beret didn't move. He didn't come here to be honored. He didn't come to be recognized. He just came to empty trash cans and clean stains that nobody else cared about. He placed something on the counter, a scorched flag patch, folded and worn. "He pulled this off my uniform when I was bleeding out in Helmand. Carried me out on foot. 22 hours with no radio, no backup, and a hole in his side the size of a fist." Tyler's mouth opened slightly. The green beret continued. "He never told anyone about it, never asked for thanks. But when he walked in here today, you treated him like a problem." Another green beret stepped forward and placed a photo on the glass. 8 men, arms slung over shoulders, dust-caked and sunburned, but smiling. The man in the center, younger then, unmistakable now, was the same one they had mocked an hour ago. Tyler's mouth opened. I didn't know." The first man slowly nodded. "Exactly. You didn't ask. No threats, no demands, just truth." Then the first man turned, the others followed. 12 of them, walking out the same way they came in, making no sound, just leaving behind a silence no bullet could replicate. Outside, a small crowd had started to gather, drawn by instinct more than curiosity. Phones came out, not to film, but to record, just in case they forgot how it felt to see something like this. The Green Berets didn't acknowledge them. They didn't need to. They got back in their vehicles and drove off, one after another, like nothing had happened. But something had. Because inside the shop, the air didn't return to normal. The clerk sat down slowly, staring at the photo still sitting in front of him. For the first time, he realized he hadn't just thrown out an old man. He had dismissed history. By 1:45 p.m., the photo had already gone viral in 3 veteran Facebook groups. It was taken by a customer who had walked in just after the Green Berets arrived. 12 men standing in complete silence inside the military surplus store, all facing the 2 frozen clerks behind the register. The caption simply read, "When you disrespect a Green Beret, you get all of them." At first, most people didn't understand the context. The post was shared and reshared, often with nothing but the American flag emoji. Then, someone asked who was the old man they were standing for. And that's when everything changed. By 2:12 p.m., a name emerged in the comments. James C. Beckett, a man who had been seen around town for years but never spoke much. Always polite, always alone, wore the same beat-up Green Beret Team 3 cap every day. No one ever asked what it meant. Until now. One commenter wrote, "He was my uncle's CO in '91. Saved 3 men in Panama. didn't talk about it once after coming home. Another added, "If that's Beckett we're talking about, a real ghost. The kind of guy you only hear about in briefings, never in the news." Someone found a grainy, scanned records showing service across Vietnam, Mogadishu, Panama, and Iraq. Over 35 confirmed personnel extractions in hostile zones. No autobiography, no press coverage, no interviews. Just decades of silence. Decades of doing the job. By 3 p.m., the local news station had picked up the story, titled simply, "Silent Visit. 12 Green Berets show up at military store in support of local veteran." The article gave no sensationalist details, just facts. A man had come in, he'd been asked to leave, an hour later a team arrived, and suddenly, a quiet, overlooked figure had become a symbol of everything people had forgotten to respect. At the shop, the silence hadn't lifted. The clerks hadn't spoken to one another in over an hour. The photograph left behind by the Green Berets sat on the counter, showing 8 men in a black and white group photo in the desert. They were muddy, sunburned, young, but their eyes were hard. Beckett was in the middle, standing with arms crossed and a half-smile that said nothing and everything at once. Customers who came in later didn't ask about ammunition or gear. They asked who the man in the photo was. They asked if he was coming back. One older customer, a Marine from Desert Storm, stood at the counter, stared at the photo for a full minute, then saluted it and walked out without saying a word. By 4 p.m., a veteran-owned publication had published a short piece titled, "The Ones Who Stand When You're Gone." It ended with a line that would be quoted thousands of times over the following days. James Beckett didn't need to speak. His silence was covered by 12 voices who chose not to raise theirs either. Back inside the store, the manager arrived, pale, holding his phone in one hand, trying to process what had just happened. The photo had been sent to him twice already before he even pulled into the lot. He didn't blame the clerks. He didn't even speak to them. He simply walked to the display case, took out the M1 Garand the old man had asked to see, and placed it on the counter beside the photo. Then he took a sheet of paper, wrote something by hand, and slid it into a clear frame next to the weapon. No fanfare, just a line of text. He carried it once. We'll carry the memory now. Outside the store, word was spreading in the way that news travels in military communities. Fast, accurate, and with an undercurrent of barely controlled anger. Carol Henderson had made her own calls after contacting Chen, reaching out to veteran nurses, female veterans groups, and military spouses who understood that what had happened to Frank Williams was an attack on all of them. By noon, a small crowd had begun to gather in the parking lot. Not protesters or troublemakers, but ordinary people who had heard fragments of the story and wanted to see for themselves whether it was true. An elderly Korean War veteran sat in his pickup truck, unwilling to leave. A military wife with 2 small children in car seats pulled up, rolled down her windows, and waited in silence. The crowd grew throughout the afternoon, but it remained respectful, almost reverent. People spoke in hushed tones, if they spoke at all. Several brought items to leave by the store's entrance. Challenge coins, small American flags, handwritten notes that simply said, "Thank you for your service." Someone had placed a folded American flag against the door, and no one dared move it. Local police had received calls about the disturbance, but when the first patrol car arrived and the officer saw what was actually happening, he simply parked at the edge of the lot and maintained a respectful distance. Officer Martinez was himself a veteran, and he understood that this wasn't a situation that required law enforcement intervention. This was something else entirely. A community holding itself accountable. Inside Miller's military surplus, Andy Morrison had finally emerged from his back office to find his store transformed. The Green Berets had departed as quietly as they had arrived, but their impact lingered like smoke after a gunshot. The photograph they had left sat on the counter like evidence in a trial, bearing witness to a truth that could no longer be denied. Andy looked at the 2 young men who had caused this catastrophe. His son, Jake, pale and shaken, and Tyler, who was still trying to process what had just happened to his comfortable worldview. Andy had heard enough from other customers to piece together the basic facts, and he felt a combination of rage and shame that threatened to overwhelm him. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Andy's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. "Do you have any concept of who that man is?" Jake opened his mouth to respond, but Andy cut him off with a look that could have stopped traffic. "Frank Williams has been the best employee this store has ever had. 3 years, never missed a day, never complained, never asked for anything except the chance to do honest work. And you humiliated him. You threw him out like garbage." Andy walked to the display case and removed the M1 Garand rifle that Frank had asked to examine earlier that morning, the request that had started this entire chain of events. He placed it on the counter next to the photograph, handling the weapon with the respect it deserved. "This rifle," Andy continued, his voice growing stronger, "is a piece of history. It was carried by men who fought for this country when democracy itself was under threat. Frank Williams wanted to hold it because he understands what it represents. He understands because he lived it." Andy pulled out a sheet of paper and wrote something by hand, his movements deliberate and final. He slid the paper into a clear frame and placed it next to the rifle. The handwritten sign read, "He carried it once, will carry the memory now. Management." By 2 p.m., the story had begun to spread beyond Fort Bragg. The photograph taken by a customer during the Green Beret's visit had been shared thousands of times across military social media networks. The image was striking in its simplicity. 12 men in a military surplus store standing in complete silence, their presence alone delivering a message more powerful than any words could convey. Local news outlets picked up the story quickly, but they approached it with unusual sensitivity. This wasn't sensationalism or manufactured outrage. This was about respect, honor, and the way a community responds when one of its own is wronged. The coverage focused not on conflict but on resolution, not on division, but on the bonds that connect those who have served. National veterans organizations began sharing the story, using it as a teaching moment about the invisible veterans who live among us, the quiet heroes who never ask for recognition but deserve our respect. The phrase, "He carried it once, we'll carry the memory now," became a rallying cry, appearing on social media posts, bumper stickers, and veteran organization newsletters across the country. Frank Williams remained largely unaware of the storm of support that was building around him. He had gone home to his small apartment, fed his elderly cat, and sat in his favorite chair by the window, reading a book about World War II aviation. The events at the store felt distant now, filed away with all the other indignities and disappointments that come with growing old in a world that values youth over wisdom. But the silence of his apartment was broken by a gentle knock at his door. Frank looked through the peephole and saw a young man in civilian clothes, though everything about his posture and bearing screamed military. Frank opened the door cautiously. "Can I help you?" "Master Chief Williams?" The young man's voice carried genuine respect. "My name is Sergeant First Class Rodriguez. I served under Master Sergeant Chen, who served under you in '98. We heard what happened today." Frank's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Chen's a good soldier." "Yes, sir. He wanted me to give you this." Rodriguez handed Frank a small wooden box. "And to tell you that if you ever need anything at all, you just need to make one phone call." Frank accepted the box but didn't open it. "That's not necessary, son. With respect, sir, it is. What happened today? That's not who we are. That's not how we treat our own." After Rodriguez left, Frank opened the box. Inside was a new challenge coin, freshly minted, bearing the Special Forces insignia on one side and a simple message on the other. Silent service, eternal brotherhood. Frank held the coin for a long moment, feeling its weight in his palm. Then he placed it on the small wooden stand next to his silver star, where it caught the afternoon light streaming through his window. In the days that followed, something shifted in town. Not dramatically, not publicly, but deeply. The gun shop, Once just another business with a cash register and a rack of tactical gear, became something else. It wasn't about weapons anymore. It was about memory. People came not to shop, but to reflect. Veterans walked through the door, not with a list, but with stories. Some left patches from their own units beside Beckett's photo. Others asked quietly, "Is he okay?" No one really knew. The truth was, James Beckett hadn't changed his routine. He still walked 2 miles every morning before the sun got too high. Still stopped at the same corner diner for black coffee with no sugar. Still sat alone at the back booth, the one no one ever asked to share. And he never once mentioned the day he was thrown out, or the men who showed up behind him. Not to the waitress, not to the cook, not even to the old Marine, who sometimes nodded at him across the room. But people noticed anyway. When a local high school invited veterans to speak in history class, Beckett didn't reply, but the week after, the principal received an envelope. Inside was a single handwritten letter describing a rescue operation in 1970. No name, no signature, just a map reference and the names of the 6 men saved. It was framed and hung in the school hallway without ceremony. 2 weeks later, the Green Beret team returned, but not to the shop. They came to Beckett's diner. They didn't take a table. They didn't make a scene. They just walked in, one by one, and stood silently by the booth while he sipped his coffee. He looked up, met their eyes, and for a second, no one breathed. Then the youngest among them, the one who hadn't been born when Beckett left the service, spoke. "Sir, if it's all right, we'd like to sit with you." Beckett nodded once. They filled the booth without another word, and for the next hour, no one in the diner heard a single thing, but everyone there remembered the silence, because it spoke louder than anything else ever could. Some men don't need a title to prove what they've done. They don't ask for credit. They don't demand recognition. They don't raise their voices to tell you they matter. At 72, he was just a janitor, mopping floors at a military surplus store. Invisible, forgotten, until 2 young clerks decided to remind him that he didn't belong. They had no idea they were about to meet the men who would never let one of their own stand alone. James Beckett never spoke to the press. When asked by a local reporter if he wanted, it rested on a small wooden stand under glass, not to display glory, but to remember those who never came home. But across the country, something had shifted. The story of what happened that day began circulating in military forums, legal ethics conferences, and even classrooms. A moment where the law tried to diminish the past, and the past responded quietly, with more dignity than any gavel ever held. Sometimes, justice doesn't need a ruling. Sometimes, it walks in, wearing a uniform, says 5 quiet words, and changes everything. Now I ask you, have you ever met someone like Beckett? Someone who never bragged, never boasted, but quietly carried history in their hands and let time forget until someone remembered. Say their name in the comments. Tell us their story. Let us know who they were before the silence. Because here, at Unsung Heroes Story, we believe that stories like this deserve to be remembered. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, subscribe and share. Help us keep these voices alive. We'll see you in the next one. And until then, if you ever see an old man standing quietly in a store, a diner, or a classroom, don't ask him what he's done. Just give him space, because he's already done enough.